Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to do a brief overview of this sword right here. This is the Shadow Dancer $250-ish sword on Amazon. The folks at Shadow Dancer reached out to me and asked me if I'd like to review one of the Amazon offerings that they had, but in order for me to leave a review on Amazon, I have to purchase it myself. It can't be a review sample. So that's what I did. I went out and bought this sword. I have my own money in it. If that's interesting to you, then let me know. But Shadow Dancer has sent me a number of review samples in the past. This one just doesn't happen to be one. So I digress. If that's interesting, then you know. I'm going to practice a little bit of martial arts with it. I'm going to talk about my experience doing that and tell you what I think about it for $250. And that's really about the extent I'm going to do. I'll cut some paper, judge the edge, but I'm not going to actually use this one much. I don't know what my intentions are exactly with it. I might use it as a dojo blade. Maybe my daughter will want to come and practice with me at some point, and one with a colorful handle might entice her. Or maybe somebody at the dojo can use it. I'm not exactly sure, but I don't intend on cutting much with it yet. I've reviewed a number of Shadow Dancer swords, though, and I think at this point they've really demonstrated that they can make a blade that's capable of not falling apart and that comes sharp. So I don't feel like that's really necessary to do here. If you're interested, then check out some of those other reviews. If there is some bothersome part, like it doesn't cut paper, or there's something that's lummoxy, I guess I'll call it out as I see it. But I digress. I'm just going to do some martial arts with it and then talk about the experience of doing it, and then I'll talk about the bits and bobs and fits and features. Out of the gate, I can tell you that I wouldn't mind if the Sugeo were a little bit longer. In Toyama Ryu, well, I don't know, it's probably also just how I tied it, but like to have these things be on roughly the same line. I find it to be helpful if it's just a little bit longer. Also, in the other style of martial arts that I do, the Sugeo just kind of gets tossed over the back here like this, and if it's longer, it tends not to come out as easily. This is not necessarily bad, and if I tied the square knot, which I have a little further up here, it would be a little more even. I digress. There are shiridome that are popping out here. I've left them in here. Those irritate me, though. I wish they just weren't in there, but it's easy enough to glue them in. Some people like to take them out. Some people like them in. If you want them in, you're going to have to glue them yourself, I guess is the point. Other quick notes, nothing feels inherently bad before I practice with a sword that I haven't done before, which I haven't. This is my first time. I give it a little bit of a tap. And what do I feel? There's a little bit of what sounds like rattle in here, but I'm not feeling any looseness in the habaki, the tsuba. Nothing is bad. So anyway, making sure that it's safe so it doesn't turn into a helicopter of death. Also, I was just practicing with a longer sword. This one is on the shorter side. It's not quite my size. Anyway, on with the martial artsiness, right? Hey. Yep. Hey. Yep. So you go. Hey. Yep. Hey. Yep. All right. Some EI. All right, so I did a few sets of kata. What did I notice about the sword? This is not what I typically do. Most of the time I'll practice with these things for a few months, but this is just for kata. What do I notice right away? Well, the sword's comfortable. One thing I noticed right away is that this is a little bit more of a teardrop shaped handle. What that does is when I hold the sword, it kind of rests right in my knuckles, I guess, and I feel like I really have a lot of connection to the edge, and I can get it exactly where I want, which is handy for cutting. If you are trying to cut tatami mats or water bottles or whatever, having a strong sense of where the edge is exactly is a good thing. Having it planted in your hand is a good thing. I feel that here. So that's nice. I wasn't expecting that on a sword that's $250. The other things that I noticed, the Ito doesn't seem to be displacing, but it's not as tight as I've come to expect from Shadow Dancer. I'm going to guess that this doesn't have their Hishigami Pro service on it, which is usually like an extra $30 or $60 or something like that. So this is probably not that. But the Kashra, the end cap, which can loosen up, has not. And if I fuddle with it a little bit, nothing is coming loose or undone. The transitions on it are excellent. In a sword that's $250, apart from other swords from Shadow Dancer, this is probably one of the cleanest looking handles that I've seen in a sword at this price point. The knots don't stand particularly proud. They're nice and recessed and they're pretty in line with the handle. Nothing is uncomfortable on my hand as I move it around or manipulate the sword. The Ito, like I said, could be a little bit tighter, but it's not so loose that it's coming undone. And a lot of times on swords, even at $300, well, this is, I guess, a problem area, I would say. Very often you can take the sword out of the box, push things around, and manipulate it in such a way where you get the handle all messed up just by thumbing the Ito around and pushing it a bit. That's not happening here, but it's not as tight as it could be. I would say it's like a B- B area for the Ito tightness on the scale of mass production swords. Ideally, the standard that you're really going for is I should be able to stand on one of these knots and not have it move around. I haven't seen that really from any, well, very, very few mass reproduction swords. Citadel, some Evolution blades have hit it, but those are the manufacturers that I've seen extraordinarily tight Ito on. I don't tend to see it on just about anyone else. Anyway, still good, still doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart. On a $250 sword, it's also a concern. If you want to get a sword that you're going to practice with, then if the Ito loosens up, it's a couple $100 to have it done by anybody in the US, and chances are it's not going to be very pretty when you're done. So, or if it is, it's going to take a long time, it's going to cost maybe more money than the sword, and it's not a problem that you want to deal with. Alternatively, you can spray it with lacquer, but that can make it kind of hard on your hands. It chews in a little bit. It solves the problem of loose Ito, but it's not a super comfortable way of going about it. So I don't think that this is going to require any of those measures in the future. So that's the nice thing I can say about it. In terms of the fitting quality, I can see cherry blossoms in the Minuki. I can see kind of a stone texture on the Fuchi and the Kashra. All of those are reasonably crisp for the money. They're simple, but crisp, and I would like smaller, like simpler, but better done things, and I feel like that's what I'm seeing here. The Fuchi, this little collar up here, has the slightest bit of wiggle to it. Not honestly a big problem, but Shadow Dancer also has had a tendency to make swords that come apart easily. Very often from mass reproduction companies, if you take this peg out, you need a hammer and some time and patience to get the handle off, and then seldom do they go back together super well again. Shadow Dancer ones have historically. Doesn't mean this one will. This is obviously, I haven't done that yet. I also do notice that the Makugi peg is placed in at an angle. That's not always something that's done, but I see it as a bonus. Sometimes people don't like that the Makugi are put in at an angle. I have done a bad job very often of calling this out, but the Makugi placed at an angle, this hole drilled in at an angle, means that when you put the Makugi in, like it pushes the handle up, and I find it to be a more effective way of putting the Makugi in anyway. Other things can be done with sizing the Makugi, I guess, properly, but I digress. Putting it in an angle is a nice thing. I'm glad to see that it's done here, at least from a functional standpoint. The fittings being a little bit loose, having it have like a little bit of rattle to it, people are going to find that irritating. So long as this handle comes off reasonably well, I don't find that to be problematic. If you're the kind of person that wants to disassemble these swords so that you can work on them, clean them, do the traditional yada yada with them, then that might be a boon to you. The habaki is a pretty simple habaki. It fits on well. It's not as nice as some of the other habaki from Shadow Dancer, but it is a serviceable and nice habaki. It's just very, very plain. The scabbard doesn't have horn fittings on it. It's got this little resin collar on it, but I do notice that the saya fits reasonably well. So it doesn't rattle, it doesn't fall out, and it's tensioned about right. Just a little push of my thumb gets it to deploy. It's also quiet. I'm hearing like a little bit of rasp inside here, but not too much. It's not snagging anywhere. A few spots I had the common thing where I put the sword away and then I bind it a little bit up at the tip. That's more me getting used to the sword than anything else. But once I kind of found my stride, it glides in and out pretty easily. It's not perfect. It's not exactly like it's on rails, but it's not raspy, and generally it's good. I like the scabbard as well. It has a little bit of taper and dimension to it. from a dojo perspective, this ishime finish, this kind of stone washed finish, is nice. It doesn't show fingerprints, and it's easy enough to fix with a Sharpie when you inevitably ding it. It does have a little, I'm guessing not horn, but plastic thing at the end. The kurigata is made of wood. It also has some, I would say, blemishes around it from the paint, but nothing that's too noticeable. You have to kind of be pedantic to look at it. And for a $250-ish sword, I'm not going to complain too much. The purple Sageo also doesn't have the exact same purple hue as the Ito. I find that always irritating, but that's kind of the case with colors in general. If you're looking to match these things perfectly, it might be better to go with a different model that has a different color Sageo than the handle. If you're trying to match red to red, brown to brown, seldom do they match. Even black to black, sometimes there's some subtle differences. This one is a shade different, but it's not grotesque or bad or anything. From the blade standpoint, it's nice. I like that when I take it out, I'm not getting a bunch of goop. Shadow Dancer sends these with a lot of oil on them, and then it's wrapped in cellophane. You have to take that cellophane off, but once I do that, I'm not finding wax and residue, which sometimes I see from other manufacturers as a way to save the sword from rusting. So what I feel here is generally nice, and as I take it out, I'm not worrying about that like goop getting on my hands or my gi or anything like that. The blade feels sharp. Haven't tested that yet, but when I move it, it's kind of quiet here. When I move it around, though, there are a few times that I did hear it. It's a little noisy outside with the traffic right now. I seldom do hear it, but it's not super loud. The fact that I could hear it at all indicates that when I'm in a dojo, I'm probably going to hear it a little better than I am right now anyway. It's on the short side for me, so make sure this fits you. Shadow Dancer can make other swords that are longer. This Amazon one, though, is kind of, it's a stocked product, so you don't really get to change much with it. What I can do is cheat here. I don't have to move my hips to get the sword out, so I tend not to, and I was just practicing with the sword that was longer. It does draw and sheath quite comfortably, though. This is not a uncomfortable sword to move around. I found it to be pretty quick. There's no hot spots on my hand. Everything feels quite comfortable. It's just not quite the right size for me personally. That said, it's handsome. I like the crane theme. I think the purple handle with the crane on it, the purple crane, is kind of a simple and elegant theme. I like the brightness of the handle on the Ito too. This skin, this silk or rayon or whatever they're using is obviously not of the highest quality, but it feels reasonably good in my hand. It doesn't feel super cheap, but it doesn't feel as nice as some of the higher end silk offerings that I felt on more expensive swords from Shadow Dancer and other vendors out there. Generally speaking, though, for $250, this is very comfortable. If a person was looking for a good training tool out of the box, this is an easy one to say, hey, I'm not spotting any problems with, at least right now. The edge feels very, very sharp. I wouldn't want to touch it more than this kind of sharp. It's already kind of digging into my skin a little bit with these light touches, so it seems to come out of the box quite sharp. I'll overlay some simple paper cutting and whatnot to give you some idea of sharpness. The blade is supposed to be made of L6. I say supposed to be only because I have no personal way of validating it. If it is, then that tends to be a good steel. I have mixed feelings personally about L6 because the super way to heat treat it is very cumbersome to do. I'm guessing that Shadow Dancer isn't doing it. And so is it special, meaningful, better? I honestly don't know. But Shadow Dancer tends to make decent swords. I've tested a number of them. They've held up reasonably well for, the dumb stuff that I do on this channel, like whacking it into metal poles and whatnot. Hopefully you're not going to be doing that. If you're cutting water bottles and things like that, I have no reason to doubt that this sword will hold up for those kind of activities. And for the money, I think while the sword is relatively simple, for $250 you can get a pretty feature-rich sword out there today. And a feature-rich sword, it's a good time to be in need of a sword. There's a lot of options that are really quite good. Many that are more feature-rich than this, where you might be able to get something with a bolder polish or something that's folded, or something with more elaborate hamon or a scabbard with horn parts or something like that. But while this is simple, I feel like it's overall really well put together, nipped and tucked in a way that a lot of the things that irritate me are addressed. And so from that standpoint, I think it's a handsome sword and I have no qualms. Unfortunately, that's as far as I can really go though, because I've taken the sword out of the box. I've done a little bit of EI with it. I've prattled on about some of the things that didn't come undone after less than an hour of usage. This is not a really effective review, but if you're curious about the offerings from Shadow Dancer and Amazon, hopefully this gives you some information, which is ideally better than nothing. All right, sword friends, that is the extent of the information that I have for you. I know this has been short and less thorough than I'm used to, but hopefully some information is better than none. This is just not one I plan on reviewing. I have a backlog of Shadow Dancer swords to review, but if you're curious about the offerings on Amazon because they're easier to buy or more available or whatever, hopefully this satiates your appetite for information. If you have more questions, throw them in the commentary down below and I will try. The basic gist I can give you, though, is I don't see anything inherently deal breaker with it, and it seems to be nipped and tucked in a way that is commensurate with other products that I've seen from Shadow Dancer, which is quite good. So assuming this holds up like other Shadow Dancers do, then $250 seems well spent. If you're looking for things that are more nipped and tucked, then feature rich. That's kind of the gist that I have for you. Hopefully that's enough. If it's not, let me know, and maybe I'll have to revisit the sword at a later date. But that's all I've got for the moment. Cheers, and thanks for watching.